All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the November MIHEC Learning Community event. My name is Liz Hannon. I'm a white woman with brown hair and glasses, wearing a blue shirt. I am one of the members of the MIHEC work group, and we're excited to see so many people here today. Please use the chat function to introduce yourself by typing your name and the city where you live. The recording of this event will be available later this week on our website. Closed captioning is available, and let us know in chat if you need any support to access this. This slide that you see here shows a logo with Minnesota Inclusive Higher Education Consortium written in gold lettering across a blue shape of the state of Minnesota. And as we begin this event, we'd like to acknowledge that in Minnesota, we are standing on Minnesota Makoche, the rightful homelands of the 4 Dakota Oyate nations, the 7 Anishinaabe nations, and other indigenous peoples. We recognize that the U.S. did not uphold its end of the land treaties. It is the current and continued displacement of these and other indigenous peoples that allows the state of Minnesota to exist today. At the Institute on Community Integration, we affirm our commitment to address systemic racism, ableism, and all other inequalities and forms of oppression to ensure inclusive communities. And today we will hear from Jean, Mary, Jessica, and Diana about their key takeaways from the Inclusive Higher Ed conferences in New York. And we welcome everyone's questions. We want this to be a discussion and conversation. So please type your questions in the chat and we'll try to get to them either during the presentations or at the end of the session. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker today, Jean Hauff.
Thank you, Liz.
Yes.
This is Jean talking. I am a white woman with brown hair. I use she, her pronouns. Going to college is more than going to classes. The student leaderships conference include classes and social activities. There were more than 100 college-age people with intellectual disability who attended the Students' Leadership Conference. It was fun to meet new people from different states and universities. I am staying in touch with some of the students that I met. There was a session about college fun. Students from University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, talked about getting involved on campus and the different social activities that are part of college life. At universities, there is the added bonus of free college swag and food. We took a campus tour of St. Louis University. It was good. I liked the campus. Advocacy. I went to several sessions on advocacy. I learned more about different kinds of advocacies. We talked about voting. Every vote counts. The advocacy session reinforced that I am the best person to make choices about my life. This is person-centered and student-led. During the conference, I had a chance to advocate. I attended a listening session with Farley Williams. She is the director of OSPEP. She wanted to hear from college students with intellectual disabilities about their college experiences. The best part of the conference was the karaoke party. We listened to music, dance, and perform. I picked the song Freedom by the Bellas. That is my theme song as a young adult. I want to go to college. And now I would like to introduce Jessica Lamb from Augustina. She is going to share about her key takeaways from the State of Art Conference. Jessica.
Thank you, Jean. My name is Jessica Lamb. Like Jean said, I am the program director for the Augie Access program at Augustana University in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm a white woman with curly brown hair that kind of looks like a crazy alpaca because I can't do anything with it. And I'm wearing a blue and yellow top, and I use she and her pronouns. It was a great pleasure to be able to attend the State of the Art Conference in person again. And there were two sessions that really stuck out in my mind as being incredibly beneficial. And the first one I'm going to talk about is being accreditation ready. The presenters were Martha Mock and Deborah Hart and Stephanie Smith Lee and Kate Weir, who are all Think College staff. And the whole idea about talking about accreditation is so very important to all of our programs because accreditation demonstrates this ongoing commitment to accountability and quality. And I think no matter how big, how small, how new, how old your program is, seeking program accreditation is so desirable. And you see it in all kinds of institutions of higher learning in education and counseling. And this accreditation provides agreed upon standards of practice, as well as meaningful processes for programs to assure that we are having a level of quality and consistency that parents can use as a metric to compare programs about what might be best for their higher education. So while programs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities are kind of a newer concept really in higher education, which of course began as a grassroots effort and then was formalized by the Higher Ed Act. With all these programs coming up around the country, there is not an established set of standards that are supposed to guide their development. There was this framework of quality indicators, but there was nothing in terms of accreditation that would create high quality and meaningful educational experiences. And there's no real formal way to determine that programs were necessarily meeting that goal. So this session sought to provide an overview of the program accreditation standards that were created, tools that were developed by our National Coordinating Center, Think College, to help assist programs to go through this process. The actual process was created by the National Coordinating Center. And then they talked about things like the discussions of the criteria that you would need to participate in if you wanted to be in their pilot, and some of those things. So some of the big highlights that I took away from this session was they did talk about the history of kind of where they were at to get to this point, because they've been working on this for over a decade now. So in 2011, the National Coordinating Center created an accreditation work group to develop these program standards. And that took, a good 5-6 years to get done. From 2015 to 2020, those standards underwent field testing. There were sessions that the Think College Network put together to get public input. Programs were surveyed about how they felt about the standards, and also were surveyed, did they even want to pursue accreditation? And then by the end of that, the U.S. Department of Ed was provided a report from that work group. So now on the calendar from 2022 to 2025, the National Coordinating Center Accreditation Work Group has developed and is actually piloting these processes for accreditation. And there is a link that is being shared from Liz in the chat that will take you right to those standards. The program accreditation covers 10 areas, which include mission, student achievement, curriculum, faculty, equipment, facility and supply, administration and fiscal capacity, student services, length and structure of the program, student complaints, and program development, planning, and review. The National Coordinating Center, Think College, has produced a lot of amazing resources that can begin to help schools think about what their accreditation journey might look like. They have a pre-accreditation self-assessment, which I recently downloaded and have started looking at because we're very interested in being able to get accreditation someday down the road. So we want to be as ready as possible. They have created a system for organizing their evidence, and they have created like a Google warehouse of where you can store all of this stuff, which is super cool. And they've even created some learning modules, which we could request to participate in those at the conference, and they'll send us a link. So I just had requested that, and I'm very excited to go through what those modules look like. Some of them are finished and some of them are in development, so that's very exciting. They also outlined that there is a 10 steps in the process of becoming accredited in the way it stands now. And a lot of that means that the program will review all the pre-accreditation tools. There will be pre-accreditation technical assistance workshops. There will be a self-assessment. Programs will submit an application for accreditation, and an accreditation team will review the application for completeness. They will complete and submit a self-study. The accreditation agency will provide and train a peer review team to come to the program, and that site visit will occur. Peer reviewers will complete a site visit report, and then hopefully the agency will make a determination. At this time, there is no accrediting body who has been interested in taking this on because it is quite a bit different than accrediting bodies you see for like nursing programs or things like that. So there is some talk left going on about who will hold this or if a whole new accrediting body will be created. But I just felt it was such a great session to sit in on and to get us to really think about how we make sure we hold our own programs to the highest standards possible. So that was the first session I attended. Are there any questions about that before I talk about the other one? And Liz, did we just say we could type questions in the chat?
Yeah, we can take questions in the chat, and I maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see any right now. So we'll interject as they come up. Or hold them at the end. Yep.
Sounds good. The next one I went to also kind of aligns itself really well with accreditation, and that's credential development. I don't think a lot of programs, there isn't a lot of guidance out there, or there wasn't, about what your credential should look like. And the whole growing number of all these institutions who are enrolling students with ID, there's a wide range of credentials that are offered. Some credentials might be like a certificate of completion that are only offered by a program, not by the university. Some are a certificate of completion that are offered by the university and have went through their whole governance system to have that authority to do that. These credentials really vary widely in their format and structure. And a lot of them also vary in the extent in which they're aligned with the institution of higher education's credential development or provision structures. But in many cases, these credentials do offer, our universities who are giving these credentials, they might be some of the first that are offered for people with individual intellectual and developmental disabilities. Right now, credentials at institutions of higher education are rapidly changing. We are seeing things of lots of online credentials, micro credentials, and nano badges and nano degrees, and degrees of non-credential value. Students, employers, researchers, educators, policymakers are all kind of considering this question: what are the characteristics of a meaningful credential? And I think a lot of us in these programs know the benefit that our students get, but a lot of us do not have industry recognized credentials. And so the concern becomes, how do we make sure we are teaching our students skills that they can use out in the real world that will hopefully start to be recognized by industry? So this session that I went through was called Credential Development, Our Journey from Proposal to Approval. And it was presented by Kate Strader and Michelle Trerrell from the Calvin University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I believe, and their Ready for Life program. So there were some really good takeaways for this. And they talked about how it was a very time-consuming process. And I think about how our program started 8 years ago, and our credential conversation continues to be regular topic at hand with our executive committee and what we're doing. And that sometimes the proposals you send through fail. So many universities start off a little bit different than our program at Augie Access did. Our program was a grant and brought to the university, and we were kind of just like left alone for the 3 years that we had the grant. And then they just absorbed us in without actually going through university governance. So we never had to submit a program proposal. We never had to do any of that. We just kind of became this thing. And now we're doing a lot of backtracking, which I feel it's really unfortunate it went this way, because now we're doing a lot of backtracking to bring our program through the governance and have a formally university approved program, because we need that for validity. We need that for if we try to go for program accreditation and all of that. So just understanding how last year we brought our program proposal to the Curriculum Council and all the work that was, and they said they weren't going to look at it because we weren't degrees granting. We've been here, we've done all this, and then they said too, we're not going to look at it because there's no accreditation standards. We have lots of things that don't have standards and programs that don't have standards. So it's interesting. So we're preparing to bring it back again. And that really resonated with me because the Ready for Life program at Calvin had 2 failed proposals. So I understand this can be difficult at lots of different places. While institutions of higher ed have variations in their approval process, there is a system and process of governance, and it's really important that you understand what that looks like at your university. I was not a person of higher education before I came into this position, and have had to learn a lot about how higher ed works. And if you don't know that, it's difficult. So just one of the big takeaways I had there was that you really need to understand your university's governance system and their approval system. Their program is super interesting because it offers 2 different credentials. One of them is called the Life and Career Studies Certificate, which is 52 credits, but they can also go on and obtain the Comprehensive Post-Secondary Education Certificate, which is 92 credits. And theirs kind of center in areas of emphasis. So they could pick up an area of emphasis in music and art, communications and commerce, creation care, education, health, wellness, and recreation, interdisciplinary studies, and ministry and human services. So they really have a lot of neat stuff going on there. They talked about some of the barriers that you face trying to get a credential approved through your program. One of the big ones that they faced was communications with large groups of people. So I was looking at their governance structure, and they literally had to talk to everybody and their dog in the university to get it to go through. Every single department had to approve it. It was quite lengthy, and they were on a very short time frame. And so that was a big barrier, just trying to get groups of people together to communicate. Very infrequently, they would run into some disagreement or lack of support for the vision of the program. That's something we've been really lucky here, is to have such huge faculty and administrative support for our program. That isn't necessarily a barrier, but that was one they had kind of faced, and of course, time to try to get everything together. They did talk about there's major benefits to the process, even a little bit more than what I spoke about, but she felt that it really solidified relationships with entities across your campus. It made more efficiency in how their program was run. It was an inclusion of all systems, and they really felt it expanded opportunities for students. So those are big benefits. Some of the main things they learned were that you need to keep it simple, that you need to use what already exists. They figured really that credential starts processes. So if you're looking for going after comprehensive transition post-secondary status with the U.S. Department of Ed, they felt that their credential really helped that, and that it also really helped in the development of their SAP, or their satisfactory academic progress measures that you have to become a CTP. They really felt it was very important to check with your registrar about how the registration systems works. Just getting our program started has been very interesting I know nothing about the realm of registrars and what they have to manage. And so I agree getting to visit with them about how that system works to even see what is capable to register your students. We at our program still have to do it the very antiquated way of they tell me what classes they want, and then I have to email them and the registrars do it manually, because our students are not set up to be able to use our platform to register for classes like everybody else, because they're not degree seeking. So that's something we keep working with. They solved a lot of problems by grandfathering in their students who were like previously enrolled. So if somebody was like mid-program, well, they were kind of shifting this proposal, they just grandfathered everybody in. And they said communication is key, that you need to be prepared for questions. There are a lot of people across the university setting who have no idea what inclusive post-secondary education is supposed to look like, what it can look like, and what it can accomplish. So you have to be prepared for questions. And a lot of that is knowing your audience and what concerns them, so that you are able to answer their questions correctly, and just provide a lot of ongoing education to the community. And they also learned that you have to be persistent. Their third time was the charm, and then they were able to get a full university approved credential. So it was really exciting to kind of learn how they did that.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That's really helpful. It's exciting to hear. Great. So now we'll turn to Mary.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Liz. I have three key takeaways that I wanted to share about today. The first is a session that I attended. It was a presentation by the Virginia Commonwealth University. The title of their presentation was "From Research to Practice, Using Customized Employment to Enhance Paid Employment Opportunities." So VCU is well known for work in this area. They actually have a rehabilitation research and training center, and they have some federal funding that helped fund this particular research project, among others. And they really sparked this particular research project based on several facts. First, relative to students, knowing that people with disabilities experience higher unemployment rates. College students with intellectual disabilities with paid employment while they're in college are 15 times more likely to have paid employment after graduation. And then the third piece was looking at college students with intellectual disabilities that were enrolled at universities and colleges that have the TIPSID federal funding. And what they have found is at that point in time, less than 50% of the students had paid employment. So clearly there was an opportunity to improve the student outcomes relative to paid employment during college that would then lead to higher levels of employment after college, paid employment. And then they also looked at faculty and staff. And two things that were driving the research is, one was that a lot of college faculty and staff in inclusive higher education simply do not have the employment supports background and experience. And then they also identified the need for some professional development and how to assist students with intellectual disabilities to plan for the career. So the whole session was really centered around customized employment. And if that's a term that you're not familiar with, it simply is the process for achieving competitive integrated employment through a relationship between an employee and an employer that is personalized to meet the needs of both the employee and the employer. And there's really sort of three components of customized employment. One is going through the discovery process. So the student with a disability or the prospective employee really hone in on what their interests and their strengths are. And then you utilize that to identify and target potential employers, and then reach out to them and see if there can be a matching in terms of the employee's interests and strengths and the and identified needs of that employer. The third component of customized employment is really then going further and developing a job description and negotiating employment. So as part of the research project and what they were presenting is that VCU developed some online courses and made it available for professional development for faculty and staff at institutions of higher ed that had initiatives for students with intellectual disabilities. And then for the faculty and staff that completed that, they offered 1 year of technical assistance, specifically in the area of customized employment. So yeah, that's all within the context of the research project where they're still in the midst of that. Ultimately, the good news is that once the research is completed and maybe they fine tune the online training, they're going to make that publicly available. So that'll be a good resource for institutions of higher ed across the country. Jacqueline Camden from VCU was one of the faculty presenters. She happens to be the director of the VCU ACET college option. Liz is gonna, or Singy is gonna put a link in the chat for that particular university. They have 100% of paid employment for their students during college as well as after college. And it was just a really good session and one that I talked with Jacqueline afterwards, and we've invited her to present at one of our future MIHEC learning community events. And I'm happy to say that she will be presenting and going into further detail at our February learning community event. So look for that in upcoming communications. Our second, or my second key takeaway was a presentation by the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. The title of their presentation was Life After College. And really what prompted the presentation was they identified the need to include transition for the students from college to life after college. And not just the students, but also for their families or the supporters. So as part of their credential that the students earn when they attend at Colorado Springs, they really have, it's really a research project where it's person-centered and student-led, where they dig into their home community or the community that they believe they're going to be living in after they graduate. And they gather also input from the parents and supporters so that it really helps the student identify what they want for after college. And part of that research, they look into living arrangements, they look into specific career plans, and then also recreation and social kinds of things that might be available in the community that they plan to live in. The student also finishes up their credential with a portfolio. But prior to graduation, for example, their senior year, they have the students complete a senior year capstone project, and it's career focused. And then they also have what they describe as this transition toolkit or resource book. And that's the one that the students has done all of the research, and it's student specific. I really liked that because they supported the students to do that research, but in their home community or the community that they chose to live in after college. And it wasn't just simply, they recognized that students were coming from across the state as well as from out of state. And they are able to support them. So it's not just specific, for example, to Colorado Springs, which I thought was good. And then ultimately the student will end up with a portfolio. And that portfolio, they include an up-to-date resume, cover letter, letters of recommendation, all of their mid-semester progress reports. That's part of their grading system. This transition toolkit, pictures of the students' time at college, and then the capstone project. And then if the student is okay with it, it's not only shared so that the student has it, but also the parents or the supporters. So they can, again, make that transition from in college to after college. The other thing that I really like, this is similar to sort of what we've learned about through Georgia Tech's presentation a year ago, but they provide continued support for alumni and for the families. So they help with career and placement after graduation, networking, and they're getting enough graduates where they're also establishing an alumni social connections. So that's good. The presentation was done by Christy Casa. She's faculty and she's the director of the initiative at that campus. And then Julie Harmon, who's one of the full-time staff members. We did talk with Christy, and I'm just really excited by what it is that they're doing and the possibility of what that could look like for universities and colleges here in Minnesota. So Christy and hopefully a student will be coming to present at our March MIHEC Learning Community event. So again, look for more information to follow. And if I didn't already say it, I think Liz and Singi were going to put a link to their website for their particular initiative. Going back, I'm going to go back really quickly. The VCU, Liz or Singi, did you send add both links? Because there was also a link to the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center. And that's a really good resource for people to take a look at.
Yes, I believe we, or maybe I didn't.
Okay. All right.
I'll double check on that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Also, there is one question from Michelle, back to the VCU part. Michelle McLaughlin asked about how does that compare with the PAES that transition programs are now doing? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that, Michelle. So I'm not sure.
So maybe somebody else will, or we can get back to that at the end. Yeah,
it would be good to know more about that. And then one final key takeaway I just wanted to share briefly. I had the opportunity to attend the pre-conference, so that was all-day sessions. And the topics were centered around state alliances and regional alliances. Think College has federal funding, and they've created the Think College Network, and they're really working to expand their technical assistance capabilities and reach more universities and colleges, as well as focusing on long-term sustainability of inclusive higher education initiatives across the country. So as part of MIHEC, I am a member of there's a Twin Cities, or excuse me, there's a Think College Network. It's a regional alliance work group. So I'm part of that, as well as I and other people that actually are here part of this session are part of the regional alliance leadership for the region that's going to be established for here in the upper Midwest. There isn't a name, and all the states aren't identified yet, but Jessica from Augustana at South Dakota. We have Anne from North Dakota at Minot State that will be a part of it. And I don't see Dawn here today, but Dawn from Bethel is part of it, and then myself. And then we'll, as other states are added, when we determine that, then there will be representation from all the states. And we'll have more information on all of the planning and how that's unfolding as it happens. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Diana.
Diana, you're muted.
I see that there's a question in the chat, and I wonder if do you want to save that, or do you want to jump on that?
Let's see. Why don't we save that? And we'll get to that after you're done. Okay.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Joesph. I am a white woman with brown hair and red glasses. I use she and her as my pronouns. I'm zooming in from Mankato, Minnesota, where I teach at MSU, and I am leading the development of the inclusive higher ed initiative at my university. This was my second time attending SOTA, but my first time attending it face to face. And I thought it was a great conference. I came home feeling really excited and trying to figure out ways that I could immediately implement every single thing I learned. So I highly recommend attending if you ever can. My biggest takeaways from the conference both came from presentations that were given by folks from the University of South Carolina's program, which is called Carolina Life. The first presentation I'm going to tell you about was called Supporting Students' Personal Development. Just for a little bit of background on Carolina Life, since I'm going to be talking about them so much. They have 25 students. They have 5 full-time staff. They have approximately 30 peers that serve as mentors or coaches. They talk about their program and being person-centered, about having high expectations for students, about having a philosophy of typicality. So all aspects of their initiative are as typical as they possibly can make them. Students are provided support, but not supervision. They provide instruction in the same 4 domains that I think everyone does, which would be academics, career development, independent living, and social engagement. But the thing I think they do that's so cool is they have a 5th domain that they've added, and that is in personal wellness. For initiatives that center self-determination, agency, dignity of risk, or prudent risk-taking, personal wellness as a domain makes a lot of sense. So I think Liz just dropped that personal wellness wheel into the chat that they use. If you take a look at it, you'll see that they've got 5 areas of wellness that they focus on. Maybe your social health, your intellectual health, promoting mental activities or curiosity, or activities that locate you as a lifelong learner. Spiritual health, it could be a faith community that you're part of, or your connection with the natural world, whatever ritual or practice makes you feel connected to something that's bigger than you and gives you a stronger understanding of your beliefs or values or ethical system. There's also emotional health, which I'm going to talk about more in a second here. But, as soon as I got home, I immediately started researching personal wellness. And I've noticed that some folks add financial well-being as part of their wellness wheel. They might add occupational, so it's the finding meaning in the work that you do, and environmental wellness. So you're not just your personal surroundings, but also including, the care and upkeep of those, making you feel, better, but also, your contribution to the larger environment. So maybe like recycling practices, for example. So to really hone in on that emotional wellness, as Carolina Life did in the presentation, they talked about how emotional wellness encompasses having the knowledge and the skills to identify, your personal feelings and emotions, to be able to recognize and label what it is that you're feeling, and then the ability to handle or manage those emotions. They discussed too that mental health concerns are on the rise for really all college students, and that includes students with ID, and those might include anxiety or depression. They also recommend a training that's called QPR, which stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. It's a suicide prevention training program that is community focused, empirically based. It's nationally recognized. They require their staff and all of their peer mentors and coaches to complete the training. And it also gives resources. It helps you recognize what signs might be of someone who is feeling suicidal, and provides resources for those who might need professional help. They also spent a lot of time on helping students realize how to access mental health resources on campus, whether that's the counseling center or resources that are in the community. So I came home ready to turn personal wellness into one of our domains as well too. In their second session that I attended, Carolina Life presented on intimacy, education, preferences, and experiences of college students with ID. They were really presenting on some research that they had done in this area that I thought was so interesting, that also when I came home, I immediately looked up their paper. So I made a PDF of it that Liz has dropped into the chat. Like their peers, college students with ID find themselves exploring their own values as they relate to sexual and intimate relationships. So Carolina Life is exploring ways to support students as they navigate those kinds of relationships. They see it as being connected to the personal wellness domain. They discussed how a lot of initiatives tend to assume that parents have taken care of sex ed, or they think that students should be protected from sexual situations. Staff might not feel like they're prepared or trained, or they might feel uncomfortable. So what happens is a lot of programs tend to handle sex ed retroactively, which is, never a good thing. There's a lack of comprehensive sex health education, but as Carolina Life also pointed out, there's also a lack of intimacy education. And they made this distinction between the two of sex ed really being about the nuts and bolts of reproductive anatomy, physiology, the mechanics of sexuality, but intimacy ed being the emotional or psychological or social context in which intimacy occurs, the feeling of closeness or being emotionally involved with another person while being listened to or understood or valued within a relationship. They were calling this romantic relationship knowledge. And they found that students want to have intimate relationships, and they want information about how to do that. So as part of their research, they surveyed 77 students, and there were 5 topics that they found, the top 5 topics that students wanted more information about. So one was how to start a relationship. Another is social skills for dating. Another is self-advocacy in the relationship. Another is self-advocacy, the relationship, and parents. And then the last was personal hygiene. So I thought those were like pretty interesting subjects. And it also seems to me that like probably everyone would like to have more information about those topics. The study also looked at how the students wanted to receive this information. And they found that students' top preference was getting it from their peer mentors. That makes sense, but also peer mentors, and they might have a lack of experience and a lack of established, good practices in their own intimate relationships, which could impact their effectiveness of delivering information. So what Carolina Life is recommending is that we provide students with the kinds of campus resources that can give them information in these areas, of sexuality or dating or intimacy. There's the health center, but there's also, if your campus has a women's center or an LGBTQ center, events that Residence Life could be putting on in these areas. And if there's any courses that your university or college offers that could plug into this, health science probably offers courses on human sexuality, but here on my campus, our Family and Consumer Science program offers a course in romantic relationships that I think I would have benefited from in my 20s. They also recommend finding out exactly what it is your students would like to learn. So establishing what their prior knowledge is, what terms and concepts and practices they already know about, and what else they might like to know about as good ways to get the ball rolling on developing this area of your program. So I think now we're going to open it up to questions.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. We welcome everyone's questions. So if you can, there's one we'll get to that was in the chat before, but just feel free to type in any questions you have, and then Singy and I'll pose them to our panel. And then there'll be more time after 4 o'clock if you can stay later. After our official end time. But there was a question, were there any sessions, this is from Elizabeth Sawyer, were there any sessions on prerequisites for post-secondary programs and how parents can help their child advocate for classes in school district transition programs so that a student with IDDD can graduate with the skills to attend a post-secondary program?
Thanks, Beth, for the question. I can go ahead and answer that. There was a session that it was titled High School Parent Information, and Kathy Becht, who's with Think College, was one that actually presented that. And so there was some information. I didn't happen to attend that one. I am also going to put into the chat right now. There's a whole bunch of resources, very specific for students and families at how to prepare. So that includes things centered about IEP goals, suggestions for parents and how to help your student prepare for college. There's different kinds of foundational skills for college and career learning that, like I said, there's a whole bunch of different resources on the Think College website that would address that question for you, Beth. And then it does look like there was well, at least one resource that was part of that particular session. And I think it was a document that was to help students and families in terms of looking at different college options. So does that help answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. I have that link now.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah.
And you're welcome also just to unmute and ask your question if you'd rather do that, if it's easier, or raise your hand.
Yeah, and maybe Michelle, could you take a couple minutes and just explain? I don't think we're familiar with the PES that you were talking about, and maybe with a little bit more information, we could help answer your question.
Yeah, I'm actually not all that familiar with it either, just initial research stuff, which is why, but what you described as the process of going through and looking for aptitudes and skills and desires and what they liked and what they're good at is all seems to be a part of this PAYS program. And a couple of transition programs that we've looked at are including that as part of what they're doing, which, and I got to the point where I was like, can parents do this too? Because it really is, it's great information to sort of learn about what your, employment aptitudes are. So I don't know enough about it really to speak any further than that. I was just curious because it sounded so familiar to what you were describing.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a maybe some person-centered and discovery process that they've got built in.
I can speak a little bit to PAYS Lab. I've worked with it in different situations. And yeah, it is a person-centered approach of their different, if you think of like in the state of Minnesota, the wheel of career exploration, and it's making sure that within each category of the wheel that there are different avenues to try different aspects within the wheel for the student to see what do they like, what don't they like. And it's looking at then like how independent is a student in completing a task, and then the tasks get harder, or what level of support is needed. And it's very, very data driven too, which then students can use that to say, hey, these are the exact skills that I'm really good at, and put that on a resume or a cover letter or something as well.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see, there's a question from Sue. Were there sessions for college students? So those would be that would be the separate sessions that Jean attended, correct? So they had a whole separate conference for college students. Jean, were there a lot of sessions to choose from?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually concurrent, where there's basically two conferences that are running parallel, and then there's some sessions that were together, right?
Yeah.
Very good.
If I could jump in there, I attended some sessions where the students themselves were presenters, and I'm guessing
nice.
probably Marianne, they're nodding too.
Mhm.
So that was pretty cool to see, students kind of telling us about their schools and about whatever aspect of it they were part of. I attended one that was on supported decision making, where the student just kind of walked us through the entire process, and it was quite excellent.
Thanks, Diana. We can keep chiming in with your questions in another minute. Thanks for the link, Amy, for the PAYS information. Singhi has a poll that we're going to ask people to complete before we close. We'd love to get your feedback on this session, and if you can just fill that out once it drops. And any other sessions or takeaways that you have from attending the conference, Jessica or Mary or Diana or Jean? Anything that you didn't share already?
It's not necessarily a specific session, but attending the conference, there were over 300 people that were signed up for the various kinds of conferences and activities. I know for the student leadership conference, there was over 100 students. And then there were like 200 plus for the state of the art conference. And then there's some other people registered for different components. But just the opportunity to network and to meet people from across the country, different initiatives, and talk to students, as Diana was saying. Almost all of the sessions I attended, there was a student or examples of student experiences and their stories. And that's just really powerful And so that just adds to the value of attending the conference.
Thanks, Mary. And then if you're able to stay until 4:15, we'll keep the discussion going. But if you're not, we really appreciate you attending today, and thank you so much for joining us and for your interest in this very important topic.
Okay, I just
Yes.
wanted to, how many post-secondary options are there in Minnesota? I wasn't really sure. And maybe there's a clearinghouse on Think College. I was just starting to explore that, but I don't know offhand.
Mary, do you want to?
Sure,
Okay.
Beth, there are 4 specific colleges and universities that are offering enrollment to students with intellectual disabilities in Minnesota today. 3 of them have that CTP designation. And really, if you think about that as the sort of minimum requirements, but more importantly, that's how students can be eligible to apply for and receive federal financial aid. And Minnesota links Minnesota specific aid to that CTP designation if a student is attending a Minnesota college or university with that CTP designation. One of the offerings here in Minnesota does not have the CTP designation. So, and you are correct, Think College does have a map with links to web pages for each of the different, because there's over 300 across the country. And they have information that's on their website, as well as typically they have a link to the website of the particular institution of higher ed and the web pages that they have.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Jean, Mary, Jessica, and Diana for presenting, and to everybody for attending.